Hey everyone, the WNBA is freaking out about Sophie Cunningham and doing everything it can to promote the alternative view on trans.
Well, we see Cheryl Reed wearing a shirt today in support of trans kids. Trans kids belong on the shirt. This in the aftermath of Sophie Cunningham's recent comments. We actually saw Cheryl and Sophie speaking at center court pregame. And yesterday, Cheryl Reeves spent a lot of time talking at length with the media about this topic.
I would encourage anyone to go and listen to Cheryl Reeves' comments. Incredibly thoughtful, easy to find online, and just encourage anyone to go and listen.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that was a Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve wearing a pro-trans t-shirt and getting talked up by the national announcers in a game against the Indiana Fever. The Fever, that's the team of Sophie Cunningham. This whole thing goes back to comments that Cunningham made in an ESPN profile a couple weeks ago saying that biological males shouldn't compete against female athletes in high-level competitive sports. Cue the outrage. The entire establishment of the WNBA, the coaches, the players, the press have all been piling on Sophie Cunningham. I want to point out how absurd this is. I want to point out how contradictory this is. I want to point out how the WNBA is a league that has wokeness on gender issues built into its DNA, and how wrong that is, and how right the embattled Sophie Cunningham is. So first, let's go to more from Cheryl Reeve.
I come from a space of inclusion. I've chosen to educate myself about the space. I've chosen to listen to transgender families, and what I know is exclusion is not the answer. And we've got to find the common ground and be inclusive.
Now, we're supposed to believe that's an extremely thoughtful statement when it relies on every cliche in the book. She talks about educating herself. She said at another point subsequently, by the way, that her t-shirt was all about education, and she relies on this key magic word, inclusion, that she clearly thinks begins and ends the debate on this issue, apparently not realizing that she's engaged in the most exclusionary business in America, right? First of all, you're excluding males. That's how you get the W part of the WNBA. Two, competitive sports is the most exclusionary enterprise in America, arguably. It's all about talent and hard work, and whether you're good or not. It's a little bit comparable, like making one of these teams. It's a little bit like making into an Ivy League school, except for Ivy League colleges can game their admission standards to let you in, even if you're not deserving, for political reasons. That doesn't happen in competitive sports. You're either good or you're not. You either start or you're on the bench. You either make the team or you're cut. It's all about exclusion. And by the way, the idea that saying biological males can't compete against females is exclusionary and prevents these people from playing sports. No, they just have to compete against other biological males because it's unfair to play against females. This shouldn't be hard to understand, but there's much more where that came from. Here's the coach from a team called the Valkyries.
For me, sports is about belonging. It's about inclusivity. It's about allowing everyone to be their authentic self. I'm big on that just because I have been criticized for my height, for my ethnicity. I've been in those "you shouldn't belong here" many times. And for me, I don't want that space, especially Golden State, to ever feel like that. So I'm all about women, little girls deserving to play, and that includes trans women. So I'm all about inclusivity.
What is she talking about? This has nothing to do with ethnicity or how you look. It has to do fundamentally with the biological advantage that males have over females. That's just common sense. But so many people in the WNBA are ideologically committed to dismissing and disregarding that common sense, or realize that they would incur great professional and personal peril if they don't at least duck and cover on this issue, which brings us to the Indiana Fever coach, the coach of Sophie Cunningham's team.
What is your stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports? What's your personal stance?
I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that. Like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels, I know growing up, I played with the boys all the time.
So
there
you
weren't
would,
girl sports.
would you
back
welcome
then.
a biological male in WNBA?
Again, it's like, I don't know. When we talk about biological male and scientifically where we are, I think it's a totally different scenario. As I said, I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart answer. I would say though that I just don't feel like exclusion is an answer, and I think that we need to have deeper, more layered conversations.
Educate, there's that word again. She's not educated enough apparently to know that top level male athletes are bigger, stronger, faster, more agile than female athletes. This is pure cowardice and embarrassing, but at least it isn't malicious and insane. Coming back to the race and ethnicity issue, by the way, as this column attacking Sophie Cunningham in the Guardian newspaper. All right, so this is pretty stunning, even by the standards of ridiculous commentary about this controversy. Justice Clark's long-range shooting made the W accessible to the men who either ridiculed or ignored women's sports. So too does Cunningham's barstool friendliness. With mainstream money comes the mainstream language and its accompanying racism and misogyny. Her whiteness sells. Her whiteness and straightness in a time of nationwide anti-blackness and homophobia sell even more. Cunningham doesn't fight it. She bathes in it. Then later in the piece, Cunningham needed the culture war to get on the map, needing as much as it needed her, and all it took was a silly finger point and being in opposition to someone black. To the aggrieved whites, standing up to someone black meant standing up for them. Add transphobia to her portfolio, and the result is a star, the latest participant in an old game no more complicated than checkers, but far less interesting. This is so stupid, it almost makes your teeth hurt. First of all, Sophie Cunningham went viral initially when she tackled another white player who had fouled her teammate Caitlin Clark earlier in the game last year.
And Sheldon comes up with the steal. Sheldon going coast to coast. And here's we got another.
As for the point went viral because the point is funny. The point is memorable. The point is memeable. No one knows who she was pointing at or what the sources of this confrontation were. No, they just like the point. Misogyny, doesn't the author realize that all this ire is being directed at a woman? Sophie Cunningham is a woman, and she hasn't engaged in misogyny at all. What she said was that males shouldn't compete in female sports. If you're saying this is somehow hatred or irrational, it's directed at males, biological males, not at women. So whatever you want to call this, this is not misogyny, but none of this matters. She is now a target of hatred in the WNBA. Here she was taking the court, getting lustily booed the other night in Portland.
Checking into the game, goalkeeper Sophie Cunningham.
And all of this, despite the fact that she is right. A sports writer named John Root had a good post on X outlining all the athletic differences between males and females. Right, so you can quibble about some of the specific numbers here, but directionally this is correct. Males have significantly more lean muscle mass. On average, men have 30 to 40% more upper body strength after puberty. Men have up to 20 times more testosterone, which leads to greater muscle development, etc. Males have higher bone density, wider shoulders, and typically longer reach. Men produce more fast-twitch muscle fibers. Males generally have larger hearts and lungs, contributing to higher aerobic capacity. Men have an average of 10 to 12% higher hemoglobin concentration, allowing the blood to carry more oxygen during exercises, etc., etc. If you want a concrete example of all this, by the way, you can go to the great Florence Griffith Joyner. She set the world record in July 1988 for the fastest female 100-meter ever run at 10.49 seconds. Pretty good, huh? But high school boys have beaten that record. Couple dozen boys under age 18 have bested that record. Couple hundred boys under age 20 have bested the record of the greatest female sprinter of all time. None of this matters, though. At the end of the day, what we're seeing is the antibodies of the WNBA attempting to reject Sophie Cunningham. Now, I'm not saying that Sophie Cunningham is directly comparable to any of these people. I'm just making the point. We've seen this before in Major League Baseball. Back in the day, there was a reliever for the Atlanta Braves named John Rocker, and he made these disparaging comments about Mets fans and New Yorkers taking the subway. Huge controversy. Basically destroys his career. He's never able to find his equilibrium as a pitcher ever again. Carlos Delgado, another ball player, decides he's going to not stand for the playing of God Bless America in the seventh inning. He's going to stay in the dugout. Huge controversy. He continues to perform at a high level. A heck of a hitter, but he has to relent and do what everyone else did, and the honorable thing, by the way, and stand for God Bless America. Then a couple years ago, there was this relief pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays, made a biblically based objection to the LGBTQ plus agenda on Instagram, cut from the team. Cut from the team. So what's the best response for Sophie Cunningham? Sticking by her guns and doing this kind of thing, which she did in that game in Portland when she was getting booed so vigorously.
Situations. 3-ball, Cunningham. That is huge.
She should be fortified by her utter confidence that she is correct on this issue. She plays for a league based on the idea that men and women are different and that women deserve a league of their own. So we are with you 100%. Sophie Cunningham, hot button issue, by the way. Comment, like, or subscribe. I promise you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.